right onto Illinois Route 59 North, Pramukh Swami Maharaj Road.
In Hinduism, the festival of Uttarayan marks the moment the sun starts to head north. And now, in history in general, when individuals have traversed this vast earth, they seem to have referenced north as a direction of hope and progress. Likewise, the sentiments of Uttarayan are rather similar. They signify progress, they signify hope, and they signify a moment of reconciliation in one's life. So, in this sabha for today, let us invite Pujya Srimuni Swami to further elaborate on the festival of Uttarayan and how, as Yuva, we too can progress further within our lives.
Shri Swamiyan Bhagavan Jai, Akshar Purushottam Maharaj Jai, Gunatitanand Swami Maharaj Jai, Bhagatji Maharaj Jai, Shastriji Maharaj Jai, Yogiji Maharaj Jai, Pramukh Swami Maharaj Jai, Mahant Swami Maharaj Jai, Pramukh Swami Maharaj Shatabdi Mahotsav Jai, Akshardham Mahotsav Jai. Every day, rather every morning, we open our phone and have our calendar app tell us where we need to go and when we need to go. We look to the calendar app for guidance to prevent ourselves from getting sidetracked and to guide our life to its proper destination. The rishis and seers of our grand Hindu heritage from over thousands of years ago infused such calendar notifications into our annual calendars. And we refer to these so-called notifications simply as festivals. So a festival helps instruct us on what we need to do on that particular day. Just take a second and think of any one festival from the calendar year. Now, you'll notice that that one festival serves as a guide showing us what we need to wear on that day, what we can possibly eat, what activities we partake in, and what we can possibly think about and pray for on that day as well. So, a calendar serves to guide our life by keeping track of events and also helps remind us of the ones that we don't mind forgetting, but definitely can't afford to forget, like that wedding anniversary. We're looking at one such event today, not a wedding anniversary, but an actual festival, Uttarayan. With the start of every new year, we celebrate Uttarayan on January 14th. While most of our Hindu festivals are dependent on the moon, thus following the Vikram Samvat calendar, Uttarayan is one of the very few festivals we celebrate that's according to the sun, thus being dependent on a date according to the English Gregorian calendar. Uttar means north, Ayan means to go. So when we put the two words together, we get the compound word Uttar Ayan, or as it's commonly pronounced, Uttarayan. Now, symbolically, north is usually referred to as the direction that signals stability, similar to the North Star. The North Star remains stationary, unmoved, while the entire cosmos of trillions of constellations of stars all rotate in unison around the North Star. The North Star is stability. North is also symbolic for progress, because the North Star helps guide anyone traveling by sea, land, or air to any direction they choose, by keeping north as a reference. Without getting too deep into the astrological details, Uttarayan marks the time of the year when the sun, which rises daily in the east, slightly appears to begin rising, still in the east, but slightly a bit more to the north, and continues on to do so as the days go by, and eventually climaxing at the furthest northern sunrise at the end of June, also known to us as the longest day of the year. So, from our human perspective here on Earth, the sun appears to begin its northern migration during this time of Uttarayan. Thus the term to go north, or rather Uttarayan. Now, that's all fine and dandy. The sun can go whichever direction it wants to go in, but the question that needs to be asked is, which direction are we going in? Which direction are you going in? We should be striving towards our true north and just toward becoming a better person in general. Using this moral compass, what if I were to tell you that for so many aspects of our life, we're usually going in the wrong direction without even realizing it? In 1995, an experiment was conducted at Harvard University's School of Public Health. A group of students were asked to choose between earning $50,000 per year, while everyone else working in the same company earned $25,000 per year. Or would you rather earn $100,000 per year, while your co-workers earned $150,000 per year? The researchers clarified that prices of all essential goods and services would be equal in both situations. So a higher salary truly meant being able to live in a nicer home, having a nicer car, and all the extra money is yours. Yet, the results showed that these material things, the things that we're always yearning for, striving for, could not change the results. 56% of the people surveyed chose option 1, the one of only earning $50,000 instead of $100,000. In other words, they were foregoing another extra $50,000 per year simply to maintain a position of relative affluence. Wow. Our perspective of affluence is completely influenced by our innate nature to compare. And usually we compare ourselves in the wrong direction, to the wrong person. This experiment shows that a majority of any sample of people would rather be worse off as long as everyone else around them is even worse off. It's very easy for us to make fun of people who are trying to keep up with the Joneses, but we ourselves fall for the same trap. Many psychologists have even warned of the dangers and the damage we are doing to our own self-esteem in making inappropriate comparisons. This experiment highlights the difference between people whose goal is to make their own life objectively the best it can be, and people whose goal is to be relatively better off than others. They then tried the same experiment, but this time replaced the desired income with a desired intellect. The people were asked to choose between two scenarios. Which do you prefer? Would you like A, an IQ of 120, while everyone else in the class had an IQ of 100? Or B, would you prefer an IQ of 140, while everyone else in the class is at 180? And you know what? Similar to the example from the income survey, almost 60% of people would rather be 20 IQ points dumber, as long as those around them are even more dumber. In other words, we would rather choose to surround ourselves with people dumber than ourselves simply to take on a persona of pseudo self-confidence, instead of surrounding ourselves with smarter people so that we can actually learn from them and improve ourselves. So this shows our natural tendency is to be illogically unreasonable. We set ourselves up for failure by comparing in the wrong direction. And the same tendency is at work when we're enjoying hours of gossiping, taking above avgun. Because It's much easier to badmouth someone else, to simply think that we're lowering them to make ourselves apparently feel better, rather than speak of someone's virtues and actually learn from them to realistically become better. Pramukh Swami Maharaj often would say, very simply, apnathi utarta hoy, teno vad na leo. Je apnathi vadar karta hoy, eno vad leo. જે નિયમ ધર્મ આજ્ઞા પ્રમાણે ન કરતા હોય તેની સામું જોયા કરીએ, પણ બીજા જે આજ્ઞા અને નિયમ ધર્મની દ્રઢતાવાળા હોય તેની સામું દ્રષ્ટિ રાખવી, એમની સાથે સરખામણી કરવી, જેથી આપણું જીવન સુધરે. Swami's teaching us to compare in the right direction. This brings us back to why festivals being sprinkled throughout the calendar year are so important. Festivals such as Uttarayan help guide us in the correct direction. Festivals help remind us to ensure that we are comparing in the correct direction. The festival of Uttarayan is literally signaling to us to double check the direction that we are headed. Uttarayan is also more simplistically and popularly known as the Kite Festival, a day when the big cities of Ahmedabad and Surat become witness to literally thousands of kites completely dotting the sky. Just as a person flying a kite controls the flight of a kite by the string, the person could be standing a kilometer away, far from the kite. And the only way we can control the kite or maintain connection with the kite is by holding onto the string. The string is the connection between us and the kite. If the string is cut, then the connection is cut. Gunatan Swami uses this kite analogy to give us a profound message. The kite itself is the sacred image of Bhagwan and Guru, Maharaj, Swami, and the Satpurush, and our connection to Bhagwan and Guru is by the string in the form of Agna. And living according to the various agnas given to us by Maharaj, Swami, and the Satpurush is our connection to them. And the stronger we grip onto these agnas and keep our life grounded in agnas, the stronger our connection is with the Satpurush. So this relationship is directly proportional. The stronger our adherence is to agnas, the stronger our connection and relationship is with the Satpurush. Gunatan Swami refers to this unique occurrence as a term you may have heard in satsang already. It goes like this: Agna Rupi Dori. Agnas are words uttered by the Guru to help align us and help us align our life with his divine outlook. Now, let's look at 3 ways that we can begin to align our lives to the divine Siddhants and the divine Satpurush. One of Man Swami Maharaj's favorite shastras to refer to is Purushottam Bolya Prite. In it, Bhagwan Swaminarayan says, Nirmanipanu, Dhiraj, ane Kshama hoy, te tran gunthi par thai chukyo. Then Man Swami Maharaj has creatively compiled these 3 virtues into a short acronym type word, Ni Di Ksha. Man Swami Maharaj has even named a few newborn baraks Nidiksh, guiding their parents to instill in their child these 3 sanskars, these 3 morals of Nirmanipanu, Dhiraj, and Kshama, Nitiksha. The Satpurush has these 3 virtues in his life. And the more we compare our life to him and gradually align our life to synchronize with his, the more we will be at peace with our true north. The Satpurush is our moral compass. That's why Bhagwan Swaminarayan states in Vachamrit Garuda section 1, number 67, Satpurushna gun avyanu. The more we compare and contrast our life with his and introspect to align our life with his life, and introspect on his life and his messages, we can quite possibly gradually acquire the virtues of the Satpurush. And the first virtue is Nirmanipanu, humility. Swami Maharaj constantly reminds us to be das na das. In college psychology and philosophy classes in Greek mythology, there's the story of Narcissus. It goes like this. A handsome young fellow by the name of Narcissus is riding his horse through the forest. He suddenly comes across a lake. He dismounts his horse and approaches the lake, and he sits down next to the edge of the lake. He extends his hand to pick up some water to quench his thirst, and in the still water, before his hand touches the lake, he notices his own image, and he's amazed at his own beauty. He continues to stare at his own reflection, and then he would return daily to sit and stare at himself, and slowly go closer and closer to the water, in amazement at his own image. One day, he got too close to the water and ends up falling in and dying. He literally drowned himself, in himself, not the lake. That's why the ancient Greeks believed it to be a superstition of bad luck, or even fatal, to stare at one's own reflection. And that's why a person so engrossed in themselves is called a narcissist. The psychiatric world has even went so far as to label the tendency as a disorder. A person who is unable to think of others and only thinks of himself is said to have a narcissistic personality disorder. Whenever we think too highly of ourselves, Narcissus is showing his ugly face. And completely on the other end of the spectrum, we see the Satpurush, always easily able to speak of himself in a very simple, humbled manner. In psychoanalysis, the term narcissism is defined as an excessive degree of self-esteem or self-involvement, and a condition that is usually a form of emotional immaturity. So conversely, a sense of humility, nirmanipanu, is actually a condition that is a form of emotional maturity. That's what we see in the Satpurush. And if you think about it, almost all the humility that we've learned is from the Satpurush. In the year 1999, when we were in Saharanpur, Pramukh Swami Maharaj said, "Tame badda bhanela kevao, ane huto dhora charto avyo." Swami would often say this. Swami Shri easily can refer to others as educated, talented, and then referring to himself, he can easily say, "I'm a simple farmer's boy who grew up taking care of cattle." And Swami Shri is saying this after he's been the president of the entire Sanstha for 50 years. Now, I want you to take a second and think back to a moment when you recently told a story about your own past. How do we say that story? How much do we add to it? How much did we glamorize it? And in Gujarati we say, how much marchu mitu did you add to the story? In other words, how much did you spice up your own story? Pramukh Swami Maharaj has never added any spice to a single one of his own stories. Never. Rather, he even downplays anything that he's actually done or anything that's happened to him, as if it's no big deal, even to the point of minimizing his own importance, erasing his own importance when telling his own stories. Even Man Swami Maharaj, in introducing himself, he says, "Sona Das, Keshav Jivan Das." For us as yuaks and yuvatis, as our careers progress, through the years we often expect at work a promotion of some kind as a form of payment for all the hard work we put in. We expect to be noticed and given praise and even a raise. But the risk is we carry this tendency with us into satsang. So we come to satsang, mandir, sabha, seva with these expectations, with some expectations of either praise of efforts or a raise of position. And sometimes this doesn't happen. Sometimes we see our fellow yuva getting recognized, and this makes us feel inferior or frustrated sometimes. Our expectations are often not fulfilled. Our expectations are like a bucket with a hole in it. It's never going to be fulfilled. So the world teaches us to assert ourselves, and if we don't, people will step all over us and we won't get to progress in life. And it appears to us that satsang teaches us the opposite, that you can actually get ahead by being humble. So how can we reconcile these two contradicting approaches? This is the conflict. And the solution to any conflict is always available in a prasang of the Satpurush, simply because he's living the siddhants that we need to live. In the year 2000, Swami Shri was here in America. He was in Miami. A meeting between him and the President of the United States of America, Mr. Bill Clinton, had been arranged. Swami Shri gifted him with a mala and the Swaminarayan mantra. They conversed and departed. And then they met again the following year in India, in Gandhinagar, Akshardham in Gujarat, in 2001. Towards the end of that meeting, in the conversation, Mr. Bill Clinton commented, referring to Swami Shri, he said, "There are too many leaders and people in this world who believe that by pulling others down, you can bring yourself up. And by discounting others, isolating or segregating them. And then he pointed to Swami Shri and he said, he is different. Swamiji connects. He connects with others and everyone around him. He works through connectivity. And that is why he is able to bring peace and harmony everywhere he goes. And he can bring so many people together. And the first time, he said, the first time Pramukh Swami Maharaj met with me in Miami, referring to last year's meeting, I saw in his eyes that he is a man who has not come ahead by eclipsing others. He has come forward by always placing others before himself. So we see in Swami Shri a spiritual leader who teaches us the harmonizing power of humility, nirmanipanu. The second trait, dheeraj. Translated, it's what all hospitals have a lot of and what you actually need at home right now during this pandemic, patience. During this COVID-19 pandemic, many of us have been spending all day and night at home with our families, and that's why patience is totally essential at home. And patience is essential at the workplace as well. So you could say for both essential and non-essential workers, patience is essential. And although we know that there are benefits to learning the virtue of patience, it's still very difficult to put it into practice. And this is often a result of what we expose ourselves to in our environment. We constantly expose ourselves to speedways and express lanes. We wake up to instant coffee. We make our food in an instant pot. And now we do our shopping on Instacart. We want everything instantly. So we've developed this mindset where we think we're on the descending elevator of life. In other words, we think if I'm not going up and just standing still, that means I'm going down. So we feel that we don't have time to be patient or take it slow or stand still or even hit pause sometimes. We constantly need to be getting things done. And if we're not careful, our liking for all that's instant mutates into impatience, which then slowly becomes our swabhav, our natural tendency. And then our swabhavs get in our way. When people around us aren't acting or doing things the way we like, we get frustrated and angry then. But we never realize that we also cause frustration to so many others around us. And so many people, just to name a few, our parents and the Satpurush, a few people who have been more than patient with us than we realize, especially as we work through our own shortcomings. In July of 1974, Pramukh Swami Maharaj was doing Vicharan in Hoboken, New Jersey. The plan was for everyone to leave for Philadelphia after breakfast. Swami Shri finishes his breakfast and is ready to leave. But he's the only person who's ready on time. None of the cars have arrived yet. So for someone who's always late and unorganized, this isn't a big deal. But for a person like Swami Shri, who's never wasted a second and is super organized, this can be difficult to handle with a smile on your face. But Swami Shri is unique. Instead of getting angry and pointing fingers at people wasting his time, Swami Shri makes constructive use of any time that unexpectedly becomes available. So Swami Shri calmly sits down on a folded blanket and begins reading and responding to letters. When things don't go according to plan, Swami Shri has a plan to make positive use of his time. So eventually, when the cars do arrive, the 4 cars are loaded up and driven almost 120 kilometers south to Philadelphia. And at 12:30 p.m., Swami Shri's car arrives at Surendra Bai's home for lunch. But one car is still stuck in the city traffic, and the other 2 cars have been looking for the wrong address. Mind you, this is before the birth of GPS and cell phones, so it would take longer to get to your destination. And to top it all off, the preparations for lunch have not even started yet. So Swami Shri calmly starts the Padramni Pujan Vidhi. And after 15 minutes, 10 minutes, one of the cars arrives and the sadhus begin preparing for lunch. And Swami Shri, noticing that we're late already, instructs them, adjust to the situation. He says, just make puri, chana, batakanu shak, and shiro. Tema var nahi lage. Swami Shri knows that these items can be prepared in less time as opposed to the planned menu. So within an hour, all the food is prepared, thara is done, and the meal is done. So we see Swami Shri is capable of staying calm amidst chaos and constructively use any extra time he has to smoothly navigate through any mishap that occurs. July 11th, 2007, during NCO 7 in Jacksonville, in which 3,000 children had just finished their convention, it was the day of departure. And unfortunately, there were thunderstorms all across the Northeast area. So countless flights were canceled and delayed, and 2 yuvuks by the name Jiten Bhai and Satyam Bhai of Atlanta were leads of the transportation department. And they were at the airport handling all of this. After a hectic day filled with chaos, they were narrating some of the incidences to Swami Shri during his dinner. And they mention that several kids even told their parents the wrong arrival dates. And a few parents even exploded on these 2. They kept their calm, and one of them then mentions to Swami Shri, Avi dasha thai. Bapa says, dasha nahi, pan bhakta bani gaya. Sahan karu ye apro siddhant che. So they said, such was our dire situation, and Bapa responded and said, not dire, but you became a devotee. Tolerating is our principle. Swami said, Au kaik thai, to samajvu ke emne agnan che, etle bole che. Apno kai વાંક નથી, આપને સાચા છીએ, એટલે મનમાં દુઃખ ના લાવું. So he said, if someone tells you off like this, you should understand that they're simply speaking out of ignorance. And it's not their fault either. We should forgive them. Then, turning to everyone, Swami Shri, he said, આ લોકો તો મદદ કરવા ગયા. સત્સંગ જીવમાં દ્રઢ થયો હોય તો ધીરજ ગુમાવાય નહીં. અને નહીં તો થઈ જાય કે કોકના છોકરા અને મારે શું લેવા દેવા, આવું હોય તો આવશે, જવું હોય તો જાય. So Swami Shri said, if we have strengthened our personal satsang, then we can maintain patience and forgive. Otherwise, anyone else would say, they're not my kids, you can come get them, and they can go whenever they please. So in this way, Swami Shri showered his blessings of Rajipo upon these two yuaks, since they managed to maintain patience in such a difficult and stressful situation. When they were asked later how they were able to do so and remain calm, they simply said, that's what Bapa has taught us. So we see in Swami Shri a spiritual coach who trains us to develop the habit of patience, dheeraj. The third trait is kshama. Translated, it's the most difficult thing to give to another person, forgiveness. The stigma is we see forgiveness as a sign of weakness, especially when we know that we're right and the other person's wrong. Because we think by forgiving, even when we know we're right, we feel that we're giving up our own righteousness and in some way diminishing ourselves. We sometimes take it upon ourselves to change the other person. So we think, if I forgive them, then they won't change. Now, the reality is, if you think about it, we often can't even correct our own mistakes. So who are we then to try and forcefully correct those of others? So it becomes harder to forgive when we forget our own mistakes. But in the Bhakta Chintamani, Nishkuran Swami has written, Kshama sama khadaga nahi jarna sama nahi japa dheeraj sama dhala nahi anemon sama nahi shapa. He said, there is no sword as strong as forgiveness, no mantra as strong as tolerance, there is no shield as strong as patience, and no retaliation as strong as silence. So we're very fortunate because we have a Brahma Swarup Guru like Swami Shri who can make this ideal of forgiveness tangible for us. He brings forgiveness to life. He makes it real for us. In 1996, Pramukh Swami Maharaj was in Toronto, Canada, having his dinner, and all the Kishores and Yuaks were seated in front of Swami Shri, and Jayesh Bhai Koria was reporting on the Kishore Mandar and Yuak Mandar activities. At the end of the report, he prayed to Swami Shri, Ke Satyakam Jabali Jeu Thai Jashena. In other words, will I become Brahmrup by following your agnas, just like Satyakam Jabali did? Swami Shri says, Atlu Gnan to thayu, dheeraj rakvi, shant rehu, kathama besu, kai bolwanu થાય તો લોખંડમાં લીટો ના કરવો પણ પાણીમાં લીટો રાખવો ખટકો રાખવો તો થાય. Swami Shri gives a simple, straightforward example for forgiveness, which Maharaj has also mentioned in the Vachramrit. Lokhandma lito versus panima lito. Swami Shri uses this example to teach forgiveness. When something happens, he said, an argument, someone opposes us, or we get frustrated with someone's actions or words, at that moment, don't let that incident become like a line that's been carved into iron or forged into iron. Rather, let that incident become like a line that we draw with our finger in water. In other words, don't draw a line into a piece of iron which becomes permanent, something that you can't erase or delete, but instead, draw a line in water. It's temporary and it disappears as if it never happened. So, if we allow an occurrence to etch itself into iron, that means we're holding a grudge and can never forget about what's happened. Instead, if we make it only a line drawn in water, that means we forget about it as if it's never happened. We often say, I forgive you, or forget about it, don't worry about it, it's no big deal. But do we really forget about it? Many people have openly confessed their mistakes to Swami Shri, a process called becoming nishkapat in front of the Satpurush. And to this, Swami Shri has repeatedly said to all these individuals, to everyone, Bhuli jo, thayuj nati, eu manu, have fari nati karu, e naki karo, ane dradta rakvi. This is the level to which Swami Shri can forgive. He can forgive anything. So we see the three traits of Ni, Di, Ksha, Nirmanipanu, Dheeraj, and Kshama, lived in the life of the Satpurush, Pramukh Swami Maharaj and Mahan Swami Maharaj. And following the Satpurush enables us to become the best version of ourselves as well, by cultivating his qualities into our life. So the Satpurush is the essential worker, always working hard to ensure that we learn and progress. Swami Shri is the spiritual teacher who guides us to imbibe these virtues of Nirmanipanu, Dheeraj, and Kshama into our life, so that we arrive at our true north and live a life of constant Uttarayan. So may he bless us, all of us, to learn the traits of Ni, Di, Ksha. Thank you.
Following the directions of a navigation system make any journey easier. It's very easy to make the wrong turn or to get distracted and get lost along the way, but with a navigation system in place, it'll tell you make a left turn, make a right turn, or make a U-turn so that we can get back onto the right path. Likewise, having the proper guide in life, whether if we're driving a car or in life in general, is always helpful, and we're extremely fortunate to have Param Pujya Mahant Swami Maharaj and Pramukh Swami Maharaj as our lives guides, because they will always lead us on the right direction. And now, granted, they might not tell us make a left at the next street or give us the directions of north, south, east, or west, but rather they gave us three simple directions, which are the directions of Ni, Di, and Ksha, meaning they lead us in the direction of Nirmanipanu, in the direction of Dheeraj, and the direction of Kshama. And we have heard about these topics in the past, we heard about them today, and I'm sure we'll hear about them in the future. But remember, even if we take the same route regularly, it's always helpful when we have something to refer to that'll lead us on the right path. Even if we take the same road to work every day, it's helpful to have your navigation out, as it'll help us navigate through traffic, choose a quicker path, and ultimately get us to the destination quicker or in a safer way. Likewise, having the Guru as our guide is the same exact thing. If we deviate from the path, or if we have a path that's taking us slower, the Guru will help us get on the right path and the quicker path. And so, like we had mentioned earlier, we're extremely fortunate to have Gurus like Pramukh Swami Maharaj and Mahan Swami Maharaj. So let us pray that just as we celebrate the journey of progress, just as we celebrate the journey of the sun traveling north in the occasion of Uttarayan, Maharaj and Swami continue to guide us so that we too can progress in our lives.
આપણે રાજી કરવા ભગવાનને અનંત અનંત જન્મથી આપણે ક્યારે આ ભગવાનને સદનું જોગ થયો ક્યારે પહેલી વાર આ જન્મમાં આપણને થયો 4-5 જન્મ પહેલાં હશે પણ એ પહેલાં તો ક્યારે આપણે જોગ થયો તો આવા ભગવાન અને એ પણ કેવળ કૃપાએ કરીને આવ્યા ભગવાન આપણે અનંત બ્રહ્માંડના અનંત જીવોના પૂન ભેગા કરીએ તો ભગવાન આવેવા સામે જોવેવા નથી પણ એમની પોતાની મરજી કે આ બ્રહ્માંડમાં પધારે અને પોતે પધાર્યા અને નર્તન ધરીને બધી લીલાઓ કરી આપણને દેખાઈ અને શુભ લીલાઓ ચૈત્ર ગાન કરવા જેવા અને આપણે સાથે રસભસ થયા એકમેક થયા અને એકાંતિક ભક્તો તો એ લાભ લેતા હતા ખરેખર કેમ કે એનું હૃદયથી કનેક્શન હતું બીજા બધાને લાભ તો મળ્યો છે લાભ લીધો છે પણ દેહ પ્રાકૃત ભાવથી એટલે આમાં ભેળસેળ હોય અને એકાંતિક ભક્તો ખાલી કે મહારાજ સિવાય બીજું કાંઈ ના આવે. એટલે એ રીતે તો આપણે પણ આજે આવા ભગવાન મળ્યા છે, બાયપાસ કરવા જેવા નથી. આપણે બાયપાસ થઈ જાય વાંધો નહીં, અને આ તો આનંદ જન્મ લીધા છે. આપણે તો બાયપાસ થયા જ છે. કેટલાય જન્મ, કયા જન્મનું વાત યાદ કરશો? બોલો, ગયા જન્મની વાત યાદ કર. ક્યાં હતા, શું હતું? આપણે એ તો બધું નાશન છે, તુચ્છ છે, ક્ષણિક છે. એમાં પણ મહારાજને રાજીપો લઈ લેવાનું, બીજું કોઈ વાત નહીં. આવા ભગવાન મળ્યા, બીજું હવે જો અબજો રૂપિયા મળતા અને પેલા ઘાસ ખોદવાની વાત હોય નહીં, એટલે દેહના ભાવ દૂર કરીને આપણે દેહના ભાવ તો દૂર થાય એમ નથી બની. પણ મહારાજે બીજી વાત કહી, નિર્માણીપણું રાખવું, ધીરજ રાખી અને ક્ષમા. આ ત્રણ વસ્તુ હોય તો ત્રણ દેહને ત્રણ અવસ્થાથી પર થઈ ચૂક્યો, આપણને ખબર ના પડે ત્રણ. અને સાચું ઓલા હું આત્મા છું, બ્રહ્મ છું, એ તો બધો અંદર બધા હજાર મામલા ચાલતા હોય. પણ આ નિર્માનીપણું અને ધીરજ અને ક્ષમા, આમાં ત્રણ અવસ્થા ત્રણ દેહથી પર થઈ ચૂક્યા, સહેજે ખબર ના પડે. અને ભક્તિભાવ, ભક્તિમય આપણે રહીને અને આ ઉઠાવ દઈએ તો આ જ કરો.